Okay, members of the board, I'm going to call this meeting to order. This is the Oakville Public Library Board for the 24th of September 2020. Members of the board, do you have any declarations of pecuniary interest today? I'm seeing none. I guess I should ask, Madam Committee Clerk, do we have any notices of, I'm sorry.
Regrets?
Regrets.
We have no regrets.
I regret that I ran all the way here in order to try to be here on time. Members of the board, you have your minutes circulated. Are there any comments, questions, errors, or omissions with respect to the minutes? Andrew, who seems to be sitting in a library.
Yeah, it's just how much I miss it. Yes, this number 9 on the minutes. Impact of the elimination of overdue charges on children's print materials. It states that Tara Wong, CEO, provided the board with an update on the elimination of children's print materials, which, although we're trying to constrict the budget, seems a bit much. So I think we should just eliminate the overdue charges and not the materials altogether. So that's page 12, item 9 in the minutes.
You've got that? Yeah. Okay. Anything further, or are we good with that?
That was it for me.
Okay, would you mind moving them for me then, please?
I will move that.
Sorry,
so moved.
Thank you. So the approval has been moved by Andrew, seconded by? Don't all rush. Susan, thank you very much. Last call for comments, questions, errors, or omissions. That's a good point. Andrew, can you clarify, are you moving the public and the confidential minutes?
Indeed, I am. Those three, public and confidential. Thank you.
And Susan, that's your understanding as well? Thank you. So last time for comments, questions, errors, or omissions. See none, I will call the question. All in favor of the approval of the minutes of the meeting of August 27th. Great, thank you. That's carried. Members of the board, we have some consent items. So we have actually 3 consent items. Would you like to separate those, or is there a motion to approve them en masse? I've seen no moves to separate. Would somebody like to give me a motion to approve the staff recommendations contained on each of the consent items? Councillor Hazard-Thiel, seconded by Pankage. Thank you very much. Last call for comments, questions. All in favor? That's great, thank you. So items 1 to 3 are approved as per their consent nature. Our first discussion item is our membership policy, and that is a report from the Customer Experience Department dated September 16th. Do we have a presentation? No, there is no presentation. Just you're there for comments or questions? That's right. Okay. Members of the board, how do you feel about this particular issue? If there's no questions, Councillor Hazard-Thiel, are you moving it, or would you like to discuss it?
I have a couple questions.
Please proceed.
So in terms of it talks in the overall statement about how we have to only change the current practice to institute the reciprocal and the non-residential, and it was because of contractual obligations with the vendors of digital collections. So could you just explain sort of what the issue was there?
For sure. So I will explain, and then if Tara has something to add, she might have something to add in terms of digital collections. So what usually happens, and I'm talking across the board, not just here at OPL, but across all libraries, is that for many digital collections products, particularly all the electronic databases, not necessarily ebooks, the pricing that is given to a particular library is based on the population that it serves. And so it is meant for the residents who live in that municipality, right? So when you are actually giving cards to people who are non-residents for no fee, you're basically not collecting any fees for the services that the residents are paying for, right? The residents are paying for through their taxes. So that's something that should be aligned, and we should, if we extend all of the services, the collections, everything that a library card holder is entitled to, outside of those who reside, work, go to school, or own property in Oakville, then they should be paying the non-resident fee. And many municipalities have it. Mississauga has it. Many others do. So the idea was that we should really be in line with that. And so my comment was that if the board approves this, when we bring the fines and fees at the next meeting with the budget, we will come with a proposal for what that non-resident fee should be based on a number of things that we need to look at, but we didn't want to do all of that if there was concern about it.
Okay, thank you for that. Any ballpark idea what we would charge for the non-resident member?
We
Do you
need to
have
do
any
our
thoughts on
homework
that
to-
at early stage?
Right. So it's too early to say. I will say that most municipalities that I know of, they range anywhere from about $45 to as high as $80 or $90. It could be higher than that. I can't speak for sure. I just know of a few. And that's kind of, it's supposed to be a reflection of the cost of library service to residents. So we need to do that homework to make sure we give you accurate numbers.
But they would have access to the ebooks as well if they were a non-resident member, correct?
They would get all the full access, but they would be paying for it.
Right. $45 to $80.
Whatever
Okay.
that would be.
Thank you. And my only other comment is, I am not 100% sure, but the chart that talks about proof of acceptable forms of identification, I believe you should be saying certificate of indigenous status, not Indian status.
Oh, for sure. We can check that. That's something that was put together, I would say, about 2 years ago. And that was we have done the research at that time, so we will obviously check that. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Anything further? Pankaj, go ahead. You're muted, sir. You're still muted.
Oh,
There you go. Go ahead.
so I had a concern on the acceptable forms of identification as well. I think we're on that right now, or maybe we're not. Ontario Health Card, I don't think is something we want to have as acceptable. There are rules and protocols around that. You have to be a caregiving institution or a hospital that can request that, and even then, it's not requested. It has to be volunteered. But there are issues when you record or jot down someone's health card, and I think those are publicly known. Those protocols around that. So I think I would prefer striking that as an acceptable form.
Can I explain how it is actually used?
Sure.
So first of all, it is only used if presented, because exactly what you said, we all know that's the case. We cannot request someone's health card. So a lot of people would only have, that would be sort of one of the few things that they have to identify themselves. So we would never ask for it. They would just present it. And all of the documentation that you see here, we would never record any numbers or anything like that. So the person would present it to us. We would, check the address, the name, whatever a combination like this says. You could have, a birth certificate along with maybe a pay stub that shows your current address. Basically, we want to see where you live and what your name is. And then we would check that and just make you a library card. We would never actually record any of that information in terms of the number and so on.
I, just as a follow-up, thank you for that. I do hear you and accept that. I just think that you don't want to open yourself up for liability, even though it's volunteered. When I go through the list, all of these other items in there are fine. The health card, if you, I know it's volunteered in this case, but I would hate for the library to open itself up for liability down the road when someone says, I didn't volunteer it, they asked for it, and they've got my health information now.
So my only comment to that, and of course the board can decide, is that by not allowing the health card, we are putting in a barrier. I can tell you from actual experience, I have done frontline library work for many, many years, is that many people, it's one of the very few things that they have. And so by not allowing that as a form of identification, when all they're saying is, hey, here's my health card, it has my name and my address, is we're putting a barrier for those who might need it more than others. So I just wanted you all to be aware of that.
It's fine. I think I've made my
Absolutely.
point.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, and we can check with legal, as Tara suggests.
Thank you. Is that all, Pankaj?
Yeah,
Okay.
thank you.
Bill Smith? You're muted. Either that or you're trying to be a ventriloquist, one or the other.
Okay.
There you go.
When I was in the banking business, we could never even ask to have a look at them. It was totally against all the regulations. We could never. The health card was nothing we could actually even ask to see. So, whatever that's worth.
Yeah. Anything further, Susan?
Can we put anything beside there? I'm concerned about the barrier. So can we put something if no other IDs available or something? So if that's all the person has and they want to show it to say, this is all I have, could we use that? Put some disclaimer that it's not the first one you ask or something, like a backup type thing?
For sure. One of the things to remind everybody that this is a list that staff use when dealing with a customer. So it is not that this list is part of the policy or anything, or that we put it out. Is that when the customer comes to us and says, I'd like to get a library card, and most people would hand you a driver's license, right? Typically, that's what most people do, is when they don't have that you can have that exchange where you're trying to help them figure out what can they give you that would verify their name and address. So certainly that's something else that we can do to encourage staff to use that as a last resort if nothing else is available. And we can consult with legal as well.
Okay, thanks.
Andrew.
Thank you, Simona. Can we update the policy to state explicitly that the library does not record any of the numbers on whatever documents are presented?
I can certainly look at that and figure out where it should go in. I would have to read it carefully to see.
I think it's worthwhile just being giving people that sense of comfort. Thank you.
I was just thinking, because whenever we collect information, we put up that statement from FIPA that says why you're collecting, what are you going to do with it. I'm just wondering if that might be a good place to also add it, or in the policy, or did you want us to come up with options? Yes.
Perhaps when you bring this back in October with the fee recommendation, could we have a look at all the relevant material? So basically what a patron would see.
Do we?
Yes, just to clarify though, we only do a form now. So back in the day, we used to do paper forms, everybody that wanted to get a library card. And then at some point in the last couple of years, we switched. It was a lot of back and forth and a lot of paper that we couldn't really keep, right? Like once the person filled out the form was filled out, it was done and you had to shred it. So we only use forms now in the case of things like a class visit, a group, let's say a grandparent who comes in with a child and says, I'd like to get them a card, I'll take it home, the parents can sign it. So we don't actually hand a form to people anymore unless they're going to take it home and bring it back to us to get a card. We do have them, they're updated, but we don't actually do it. So on a typical exchange where a person comes to us and says, hey, I want to get a library card, it's just basically they present us with the information, we check that it's accurate, or that it makes sense, that we have enough proof of where they live. We make them the library card. We don't record any of the information. So if the concern is about the recording of information, then probably a statement in the policy might be sufficient to cover all of that, I would think, because of the way we operate.
Fine. And just, again, from the customer experience standpoint, it could potentially be a concern, if you hand someone your ID and then they have it in front of them and then they're typing in a computer and you don't necessarily know what they're typing. But if it's stated explicitly, we're not actually recording that number. And even better, if the staff member maybe, verifies the identification, then hands it back before they even complete the data entry. I don't know if that's reasonable or not, but I think we want to give people a sense of comfort that we're not retaining that information because, as we know, identity theft has become a huge issue in our world. And so the more we can, I think, appease people, it'll make them feel good.
So can I just clarify so I know what I'm bringing back?
Well, let me make a comment as well before you sum up, okay? Does anybody have any comment before? So I have a bit of experience in this area, and I can tell you that the Privacy Commissioner for Ontario states that you can volunteer your health card. That is legal. You may not record or require the recording of the health card number. You can't even give you permission to record the health card number. It's that confidential. But using it as a photo ID is acceptable at the discretion of the user. So I think Andrew made the suggestion that we make sure that it's clear that it's voluntary, and that we make sure that it's clear that we're not recording data other than address data from ID. I think that would be a reasonable approach. The other thing I think we should consider is, you already have it here. You have some alternative documents as well, because I know that some
Yes.
organizations will use things like leases and that sort of thing. I know that with my other hat as the former chair of the Health and Social Services Committee, we had a big issue. I know this is a bit of a tangent, but I'll get to it really quickly. I'll get to the point really quickly. We had an issue where Ontario Works recipients were en masse cashing their Ontario Works checks when they still issue checks. I don't think they do anymore, but they were cashing their checks at check cashing centers because banks would not open bank accounts for them because they didn't have adequate ID. And that was because banks, as to Bill's point, banks will not accept a health card, and that's often the only piece of ID that they hold. So I wouldn't be in favor of removing it, because I do know that particularly working with those in poverty situations, that literally is their only connection to identification. But we need to be very clear, in my opinion, we need to be very clear on what we're doing with that information, and even spell it out in 30-point type on the form or something, or on a piece of a document you can hand them as they're giving you the information, so that they understand that we're following the rules and what we can and can't ask. And I was just going to add, and I have a question. So the FIPA details, do we publish that anywhere on our website, or do we? Okay, we do.
So it's funny because just today, I think, we had to, or yesterday, we went and updated in one place. Wherever we collect information,
Yes.
we're supposed to write what we're collecting it for, what we're going to use it for.
Yes.
So we do it on the library card form. Right now, when we take reservations for computer use through Communico, we do it there. It's just escaping me. Anything that we're putting out, where people are handing you a piece of paper, we are putting it at the bottom.
And clearly the FIPA rules.
Yes.
Okay, that's
so
great.
the name of the legislation is listed. It tells you what is going to be used for, because not every time you put something out, you're going to use it for the same reason, right? And then it tells you, if you have questions, who to contact. And it's my position, but it's really the main library number.
And last question I've got is, what if all else fails? And somebody is just not comfortable presenting their health card, and we can't oblige them to. And obliging them to could mean a librarian saying, well, if you don't want to give us a health card, we can't give you a library card, because that's kind of an obligatory statement. If you wanted to take advantage of your tax-paid services, you have to provide that. So what do we do in the case where there is no ID? Do we have any alternative method of addressing the issue, whether it be somebody vouching or a limited number of items that can be taken out, et cetera?
That's exactly it. So I'm so happy you brought this forward. We've been wanting to do this for a long time, and then we did it. We just didn't particularly advertise it a lot. And that is on page 26, right at the top, the limited privileges card. So we call ours an easy access card. Some of you might have heard it called an access card or a barrier-free card at other public libraries. And that's exactly what it is. For those people who do not have adequate documentation.
I missed in the report.
Yes, and we have limits. So they have full access to the digital collections, and they get only, at the moment, only up to two physical items. That can be changed. It was particularly useful during the times that the library was closed, because we were able to give cards via email through our OPL reference email to, I can't even remember, but at one point it was 500 people, it might be more than that, to give them library cards without actually being able to verify that, because they were emailing you or you were talking to them on the phone, but they had full access to the digital collections. They got two physical items. They couldn't borrow any at the time anyways. And then as soon as we reopened, they were able to come in and exchange those for a full privileges card upon showing identification. So yeah, this is wonderful, and we'd like to promote it more with our partners. But really, now, once the policy is approved, we'll be able to do more of that, for sure.
Okay. Members of the board, does that tweak any more questions or comments? Oh, okay, Councillor Hazathiel.
My only comment would be, I wouldn't want us to promote it. I totally get that we want to eliminate a barrier, and we want to have an internal policy that shows them dignity and respect and tries to find solutions for them, but I wouldn't want to promote it. 99% of the people are going to have some form of documentation. They might have to go back to their place to get a copy of their, a mail, or they might have to find something. I'm having flashbacks to having to do that when I first came to Oakville, going, I guess I've got to find something with my mailing address on it. Yeah, I just wouldn't want to promote that. I don't think that's what we should be doing.
Could
Can
you
I
maybe
answer
clarify what you mean by promoting
That's
it? Because,
right.
I mean,
Thank
there's
you.
a difference between promoting it by having a giant banner that says,
Right.
borrow materials without ID, and promoting it within your staff to know that that's an exceptional, a reasonable approach. Could
That's-
you maybe explain that more for clarity?
For sure. So absolutely. So what we meant was not promotional in the traditional sense of promoting it as a new library card, but really promoting it with our partners in the community for those who serve the community that might need this kind of library card, so that they are aware that the library provides such a thing. And again, not like we're not going to put posters and banners and any of that. It's just that sometimes when community workers are working with individuals, they are aware that the library does such a thing. And through Marcus's team, and that would be the promotion that we had in mind. So more spreading the word about what we do. Perhaps the word promotion is not appropriate. And you're right in encouraging our staff, but our staff are aware of it. But encouraging them even further, for sure.
Does that help you at all, Councillor?
It does. I support a little bit of what Andrew was saying earlier, where when you come back with this, it would be nice to see the documentation that's given to staff, because the documentation we're being shown isn't very explicit. And while I know we have low turnover, it is helpful for the instructions to be on there in a manner that speaks to what everybody's just been talking about. Those would be my comments.
Okay. Colleen? You're still muted. There you go.
Am I unmuted?
Now
Okay.
you're not.
So I just wanted to comment that in working with disadvantaged youth, what you will find is they're the group that's most likely to have a lack of identification. Often from a homeless perspective, in Oakville, the most common the most common accommodation that someone who's homeless has is they couch surf with their friends. But there is high risk that they will be lacking in ID for a variety of reasons. And so you'd be surprised at what the percentage is on that. But to Simona's point, the type of groups that we would be talking to would be more youth-oriented agencies, as an example, employment and training agencies, shelters, more those kinds of things, because libraries in general are seen as a safe place. And it's also an opportunity for them to look at ways that they can educate themselves and look for a better path. So libraries are really important from that standpoint. But I'm thinking specifically more on disadvantaged youth in particular.
Yeah. Thank you. That's a good comment. Okay, I think that we've given Simona a lot of information to take back to potentially complete your policy with respect to board input. Would you agree?
I would like to ask some clarification.
That's fine.
Because a lot of the stuff that we talked about, with the exception of the piece about we're not recording any information from people's IDs, that one we agreed that it would fit well in the policy statement. A lot of the other stuff that we talked about how we would actually apply it, we talked about the limited privileges card, would be stuff that would be staff only, would be procedures and forms. So I just want to clarify about what you'd like to see changes to the policy, in addition to the statement about not recording information from people's IDs, of course. Is there anything else that you would like to see in the actual policy? And then I'll seek clarification about what other documentation you'd like to
I
see.
think if I can summarize, and board, jump in if I've missed anything. I believe that the desire is to see specific reference, as you stated, to a policy about not collecting, identifying numbers or membership information from other cards, that is to simply be used to verify. And the disclaimer that health cards in writing are voluntarily provided, that they cannot be required. And the third piece, of course, is oh no, we already talked about FIPA, you're already covering that. So if the FIPA document is already available on the website, and you are already reflecting FIPA rules in your policy. So I don't think that requires any extra action. Have I missed anything other than the fact that you'd like to see a final version and the supporting documents for the librarians to use? Is that, am I missing anything else? I think that what I heard from, I don't remember who mentioned this, it may have been Councillor Hazelfield, that if we could have, when you bring the policy back, the proposed form, so that we can see how that's going to get set out. Is that possible?
Are we talking about the library card registration form, the one that I
Yes.
mentioned to you that we don't actually do except in situations where we're giving it to somebody to take home or we're doing it for a class visit? Those are updated, so we can certainly bring those to you. But as I mentioned, we're not handing them out to every person to fill out and hand it back to us with their ID.
So can you just maybe explain, what is the process? So I show up at the library and I say, I'd like a library card. I remember when I first landed on, the doorstep of Oakville, I got forms for all my kids.
Yes.
And we filled them out. So what's the process now?
So we will ask you for the identification, which is a mix of the stuff that's listed in the chart.
Right.
Okay. We don't post the chart. We use that so we can have a conversation with you.
Right.
The way you usually ask is, do you have some ID with your name and address on it? Most people hand you that. Some
Right.
people say, well, I have something just with my name on it,
Right.
but I don't have something with my address. And then you start having the conversation, and you're using that list to help you guide that conversation. You get the appropriate ID. Hopefully, they have it all. Okay, so maybe something with their address, maybe a bill, and maybe something with their name on it. You go make the library card. You will ask them for their address, for their email address, and for their phone number, which are not going to be listed in any of that. You make their library card. You hand them a library card. They sign the library card, and obviously, as you do that, you go over all of the things that they should be aware of. The things that, how long they can borrow things for. There are fines, well, not right now,
Yeah.
on overdue items, hold expiry fees, and all of the things. You hand them, not right now, the all about your library, and you hand them all sorts of things. Although the all about your library, we have it, and we can still hand it to people. We just don't put it in the brochure rack. You hand them a program guide, which, again, right now there isn't one available. You direct them to the website, and so on and so forth.
Okay.
So that's how it's generally done. And what I'm saying here is reflective of not just OPL. That's how it's generally done in public libraries today.
So would you be able to, as part of that process, have a statement that you could make to a customer that would say, I'm requesting identification for the purposes of verifying your identity, and I am not recording any data from your cards, and that the provision of a health card is voluntary, so something like that? If you don't want to have paper, is that possible to have that statement as part of that routine?
For sure, we can instruct staff to be very clear about those two things. Absolutely, yeah, it's part of the training. Like I said, because you use that chart to guide your conversation, right?
Mm-hmm.
So you can be clear about, they already don't know to ask for a health card. Like that's always been the case, right? They leave the health card last, but then to be clear that they're not recording any information from the ID. So that certainly can be done.
Okay.
So just to clarify, we will still put a statement in the actual policy saying we're not collecting any of that. We are bringing back to you a copy of the form, understanding that the form is not necessarily being used on a one-to-one, right? Is there any other supporting documentation? We'll revise the chart with the suggestion that you had about the Indigenous status that was not correct. What other supporting documentation would you like to see, or is that sufficient? Does that answer the questions?
What do you think, Board? Or does anybody else have any? I saw Councillor Hazafield's hand go up before I so rudely dominated the floor. Did you have further comment?
Nope, all covered. Thank
Good.
you.
Okay. I think that you've covered it, Simona, and thank you for your understanding of our concerns on this matter. Thank you very much. Members of the board, I need a motion to approve, or this is a move to receive the information, and we will get a subsequent follow-up final policy, I guess, in October. Can somebody move the receipt? Thank you, Andrew. Seconded by Councillor Hazathiel. All in favor? That's carried. Thank you. Okay, we're moving on to item number 5, which is the RFID review. And, oh, it's Simona again.
There it is. It's time right. So there is no presentation to go with this. We have put together the report based on your request at the January 2020 meeting. It seems like a very long time ago, but there we missed a few.
It's a different world back then.
Right, and you know, we wrote most of this back for March, and we updated a little bit of it at the end for the current situation. So did you want me to very briefly go over it, or is it better that we take questions since
Well,
it is all covered?
let me ask the board, are there any questions with respect to this, or is this information satisfactory to our request? Back in the pre-COVID world. Okay, I'm not seeing any desire to interrogate you on this one, so is there a motion to approve the receipt of this information? Thank you, Bill. Seconded by Pankage. Thank you very much. All in favor? That's carried. Okay, so we're moving on to the Ontario Public Library Week Plan. A team change.
Thanks, Simone. Yeah, similar to Simone's, there's no presentation for this one, just for the board to receive for information.
Members of the board, do you have any questions? Yeah, oh, we do have some questions. Andrew, let's start with Andrew.
Thanks, Joe. This is really thorough and appreciate you putting it together. Just diving into Appendix A. Sorry, I'm just pulling up my notes here. Page 36. So, you know, we talked about some of the communications objectives, the website teaser, virtual programs, spotlighting diverse collections, and one that caught my eye was the Beanstack Reading Challenge. Same application of summer reading. I'm just wondering if we have any results from electronic communications that have been issued, you know, basically since March, but certainly over the summer with Beanstack especially. And, you know, just wondering what the uptake was of programs like that. And the reason is to make sure that we can make our communications as meaningful as possible to the recipients. So I just didn't know if you had any early results that might inform our objectives for this launch.
Yeah, great question, Andrew. I don't have any with us this evening, but we can definitely take it for the next board meeting and bring some results from the virtual programming and some of the summer reading challenges that we put together.
Okay. And sorry, just following on, the website teaser as well. Given the challenges that we've had with the website, I admit that I'm quite reluctant to say anything about it at this point until we have something that's ready to go. So that's my feeling, but of course, I'm interested in hearing from my fellow board members as well. I do definitely support talking about the Express Novel branch. I think that's a great initiative to highlight. But other than that, again, it's comprehensive. Thank you for the work.
Yeah, absolutely. And just on the website teaser, I completely understand. We, as they said, we discussed last month on the board meeting, it was starting to introduce it to the public. It hasn't really been introduced at all. The goal of this would just be some screenshots just to get some people excited, since everything has moved, a lot of things have moved online. So to start introducing the thought of this is coming in 2021, but as Tara has an update in her CEO update about the website, but as we look to progress with that, the hope is 2021, and that would be the goal, is to tease people that it is coming next year. But again, up to the board, we can definitely strike it from Library Week Communications.
Okay. Well, yeah, I look forward to hearing comments from the others. Thank you.
Thank you. Next up is Steve.
Okay, hi. Thanks, Joe. So I have to say, a little surprised you didn't take the opportunity to even try and frame this plan You went straight to our question, so I will take that opportunity to go into it.
Perfect.
I'm looking at page 37, and I appreciate this is still a work in progress, but I would suggest the very first bullet point under Library Week General is in no way a key message. It might be a supporting point, and we can get into nuance, but what I was looking for here, and I appreciate, again, it is an evergreen thing that's going to develop. There seems to be no animating themes here outside of the one card, 1 million opportunities, which I think is kind of cool. So I just wanted to get your thoughts as opposed to some pretty dense writing under what is ostensibly key messages. What are we trying to tell people?
Yeah, so this was our brief that we're giving our creative and marketing team to start inspiring everyone to think about Library Week. So this was put together probably about 2-3 weeks ago as we begin discussing ideas and things that we could bring to life. This year, because of COVID, historically in the past, we've done a lot of promotions and items that brought and attracted people to the branch. This year, we had to drastically change that approach. It worked very well in the past, but this year we had to drastically change that approach because, again, we're not necessarily attracting large groups to the branch for in-program activity, like that sort of stuff, as well as one of the main attractions we did last year was if you were to come to the branch on Customer Appreciation Day, we reduced your fines by $10. Since pretty much none of those apply this year, we had to drastically change our approach to essentially giving and kind of more or less introducing people to some of the new initiatives and features that we're doing. We're going to use last month's, amazing decision to permanently remove fines as kind of the headliner for this. But again, overall, the general theme is kind of the one card, 1 million possibilities. But it's going to be headline again. The main communication would be the permanent reduction of the fines. But overall, again, it's the overall fee is the one card, 1 million possibilities. And then on that theme, we're going to introduce all these new initiatives and features that we're doing that's coming new to OPL in the subsequent months and in 2021.
Okay, and don't get me wrong, I think there's some cool stuff coming down the line, but you'll appreciate, I'm not trying to wordsmith here, but trying to narrow in a little bit of what we're saying, and it struck me in reading this. And I appreciate this is a provincial-wide theme that's then to be informed and animated locally. But our customers have been through an awful lot as well, and we've imposed a lot on them for understandable reasons by shutting down. And so, yes, it's about the library, but it's also about the people we serve. And I'm not suggesting we revisit the past constantly. I'm not saying that. We're still living with the pandemic, but perhaps there's some expression in here about the resourcefulness of our customers as well. Like, we are a resource, but they've been resourceful. And maybe something in your messaging that reflects that, yes, we're here, we're connectors. And Colleen made some really good points about, the libraries are safe spaces. All that is true. And it's wonderfully true. But I wonder if there might be some reflection on the fact that, without falling on the sword, we close. I'm not suggesting we do that. But customers have been through an awful lot as well. And I scribbled down over a late afternoon coffee, literally the word resource-full, F-U-L-L. I'm not a branding guy, but I just like to throw around words to kind of think of themes. And, as you crystallize this, Joe, maybe there's something that really starts to pop out, and I appreciate you've got to start somewhere. But I did have a chuckle when I saw leverage the pan-provincial campaign as a key message. Oh dear, let's go after some low-hanging fruit while we're at it. So I'm being a touch facetious. It's a lot of work in here, but I think we can kind of crystallize this, right? In a couple themes that are digestible for everybody who's been through a heck of a lot. I'm not suggesting that we're in it together. I think that's overused by a million things, although that is true. So I'll leave it at that.
Unprecedented times, don't forget.
I would suggest, and you may already be doing this, what are the key themes? I'm not suggesting bumper sticker politics, but it's got to be a little more crisp.
Absolutely. And again, this is just our brief to kind of begin the thought, but you're absolutely right. That's our goal. So hopefully by probably about next week at this time, we'll have that theme narrowed down, and then we'll start generating all that content for it. Is that you're a little bit ahead of us, but we're about a week away from that level of detail.
Well, I appreciate it's a lot of work, and I think you guys are doing a great job. Just I wanted to make those comments.
Yeah, no problem. Thank you.
Thank you, Steve. Councillor Hazathiel.
So to add to and support some of the comments from my fellow board members, I would agree. I'm a little nervous about the website teaser. I'm not sure what value that brings because we have told people before we're working on a website. And in fact, I think we should focus on what we have delivered, what we can deliver, and how much we appreciate them versus, look, we don't need to tease them. The day it's ready, they will be, we can have a big celebration and launch. I'm not sure there's any value in, the phrase I like to use is don't overpromise and underdeliver. It's a dangerous path to go down. In terms of the fine focus, I would like to see some language around the research that has been done in other parts of the country and the circulation of materials and how this benefits that. I have had more than a couple people who are aware of the decision we made challenge me, and I've backed it up by saying, listen, all the right things, but on top of that, more materials will get returned. They won't get hidden under a bed forever, and the circulation will be beneficial. I do think we need to say that in some of the language that's out there. And I would agree that I think we should, less is more, execute well. And I love the one card. I think that's a great phrase. I'd play off it all day long. It really does make people see that the library is the window to the world. So those are my comments.
Thank you. Did I skip you, Susan? Did you have your hand up earlier? No, okay. Any other comments? Okay, I think we've given Joe a lot of good feedback here, so I'll look for a motion to receive the report. Would somebody like to give that to me, please? Stephen, thank you. Seconded by? Andrew? All in favor? That item is now received. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
We are now on to diversity and inclusion report. It's our CEO.
It is. How are you doing?
Good, thank you.
So the board will remember last board meeting in my CEO update, I gave a little bit of highlight of some of the diversity inclusion initiatives that OPL has been part of, indicating that we would bring a broader report to the board this month, and that's what this is. However, I'm a firm believer that it's best heard from the people who are closest to it. So I've asked our manager of programming development and our manager of community development and engagement, Danica and Marcus, to give you a presentation that will really bring this report to life. So I'm going to pass it over to Danica.
Hello and welcome.
All right.
Hello.
Hi.
And there is a
Good
PowerPoint.
to see you all. Yeah, so there is a PowerPoint.
Okay. Can IT bring up the PowerPoint for us, please? There we go.
Great. Thank you. All right. Happy to see you. I'm excited to share some of the work we're doing around inclusivity today. Oh, then how do I?
You just
I
have to tell us.
How do I change slides?
Just say next slide.
Oh, next slide. Great. Thank you. This is new for me, this sort of format. Today, we're going to talk about inclusion initiatives, but they're focused on library services, specifically collections, community engagement, and program development. We're going to provide a brief current state of library service, just a sample of some of our active initiatives, and the next steps that we see. Next slide. As I'm sure you know, public libraries today are built on the value of equity to access of information. And way back in 2008, the Canadian Library Association position statement on inclusion and diversity stated that libraries have a responsibility to contribute to a culture that recognizes diversity and fosters social inclusion. Applying a local lens, in 2018, Oakville Public Library looked internally to develop customer experience values that would provide staff with a decision-making framework as well as a common language to align services. 5 values were revealed. The first and most important to Oakville Public Library staff was inclusion. And Oakville Public Library staff shared that they were very committed to inviting and embracing everyone in our community. Next slide. Thank you. So right now, we are working on improving services to be more, like current services to be more inclusive, as well as layering on new services that are more intentional in terms of inclusion. We do recognize that there are gaps in current offerings and intentional programs that give voice to Indigenous peoples and the Black community, and a need for anti-oppression framework and language, as well as inclusive language. And I'd be remiss not to identify the fact that going fine-free will reduce some barriers and is an incredible act of inclusion for our community. Next slide. So I'm going to speak briefly to some of the work we're doing in collections. We've made an investment to do some diversity spending to improve our collection with a focus on Black, Indigenous, and underrepresented groups and intersectionality. The title selected, we're actually going to do some consultation with community groups and organizations to ensure that we are selecting appropriate titles. We are updating collection profiles and spending plans with dedicated spending for LGBTQ, Indigenous authors and illustrators. The collections policy I hear is forthcoming with a focus on diversity and inclusion. We do offer, as you know, a multilingual collection. I believe there's 12 languages, not including French and English. And these selections are based on Statistics Canada as well as circulation and just our local knowledge. And finally, for collections, we did get the Emergency Community Support Fund grant, and collections is supporting in adding more Wi-Fi as well as tablets for in-need older adults and those that have been impacted most by the digital divide. And for me, these will, well, for my team, this will support in providing programs to those that have only been able to connect to our programs by phone this far. Next slide. And over to Marcus.
Hello, good evening, everyone. So, community engagement and outreach. Is provide you with a sample on current initiatives that we have, and I've broken it down into a couple of our marginalized or underserved populations that that I love so much. And so our first one is, of course, our Indigenous population here in Oakville and in Halton. So we have a really strong partnership, really good participation with the Oakville Partnership on Truth and Reconciliation, which is housed out of the Oakville Community Foundation. And so we have been for the last 3 years providing the community with a lot of educational events, if you will. So missing and murdered Indigenous women and girls. So that's the red dress display. We just 2 days ago, we're at the Oakville Museum with some grandmothers, and we smudged about, I think there was about 130 dresses, red dresses, that are now going out into the community. And there was a bit of a ceremony to honor the murdered missing Indigenous women. And so that's a partnership with the YMCA, the museum, the town, Oakville Public Library, the police. So we're all there working towards truth and reconciliation issues. We participated in a report on Indigenous homelessness in Halton. And of course, the wampum exchange with the town just recently happened as well. And we always honor our Treaty Week. We have a really great relationship with our Kids Network Indigenous lead, Angela. So she I'm laughing because today we did the last point there. We recorded our cooking Indigenous food for Culture Days with the town at QEP in the kitchen, and a really amazing time. And so that's going to be part of our Culture Days. But we also did with Angela for the town, recorded a territorial land acknowledgement for the virtual Canada Day celebration. And so just so you know, everything that I do with our partners in the community, I always bring like reading lists, and I always bring the library back, like the work back into the library, or the library into the work that we're doing out in the community. There's also a North Oakville, part of our Kids Network, have a North Oakville Youth Action Group, and they recently did an Indigenous scavenger hunt, and I've learned today that they are going to be formally requesting a little bit of a display of Indigenous heroes that they're choosing, that we want to display in they want it displayed in all of our libraries. So there's also just going back to the summer reading program, we have a partnership with Toronto Rock lacrosse team, who are housed in Oakville, and we did a summer reading program with them. They donated some prizes for us, and they also did a video or a recorded session for our online initiatives where they talked about lacrosse. And of course, we opened it up with our librarian program person, opened it up with a territorial acknowledgement, and also a little bit of history of the history of lacrosse as an Indigenous first game. And it was a really amazing point and really amazing time that Dan, the lacrosse person, I can't remember his last name, really talked about how that team really did dig down into Indigenous culture and history around lacrosse, and how it's a medicine game, and how they really incorporate that into their team. And so that was a really great partnership, and an unsurprising partnership. And so I'm just going to really quickly, I hope, Danica, you're okay with this, but there was a question about the summer reading programs. And because I was dealing with our sponsor, I got some stats. And so we had a total of 952 total registrations. And that breaks down into 461 adults, 90 teens, and 401 kids participated in our summer reading program. So congratulations, Danica. That's great. So our future plans with some of them with the Indigenous community is Tanya and I from town have been talking about doing a medicine garden on the library property somewhere. Of course, it's going to be at Central because that's where I live and that's where I want everything to happen. There is an agency or a movement called the Halton Learning Lodge, now transitioned into Grandmother's Voice, and that is through the Halton District Catholic School Board, Sherry Savell and Jody, who really are taking on a lot of Indigenous education and events and recognition to move truth and reconciliation forward. I also, before COVID happened, I was working with Grandmother's Voice, or Halton Learning Lodge, to create an elder in residence for OPL. So we're still talking about that, but obviously it's going to be online until we can fully open again and have a space in our library. And an elder in residence program is where we have an Indigenous elder who will be there at a specific time every week or every month to provide teachings and support to Indigenous and non-Indigenous customers. Next slide. So the 2S LGBTQ plus community is very near and dear to my heart, and so we have a really great partnership again with the Oakville Community Foundation and their Community Foundation of Canada. We achieved a gender equity grant, which we were able to support 30 of our community partners in some positive space training. Of course, that got put on hold because of COVID, because it was like the day after. I have been a guest on the Project Autism podcast for Pride Month to talk about intersectional identities, having autism and being LGBTQ identified. I also consult a lot with and this is because of my past 20 years in the Halton region and the work that I did. I consult a lot with the faith and worship spaces on their affirming journeys to become affirming churches and congregations. And then I have also been doing some work with agencies in the Halton or Oakville area around using their pronoun signatures. So you'll see sometimes on your Zoom name or on your signature on your email, it lists your pronoun, he, him, her, she, that kind of thing. And so there's always some work to be done around the LGBT community. The autism community is near and dear to my heart as well. Ever since being introduced to Aidan Lee, so his Halton Youth Disability Action Council used to meet monthly at OPL until COVID, but now they're doing everything online. And for that community, we came up with a library evenings for their junior and adult groups. So they were invited into our library at Central to understand how to check out a book, how to talk to a librarian, what is to be expected. Because that community tells us a lot. They're afraid to come to our libraries or any library because their kids are loud, because their libraries are supposed to be quiet. So we really wanted them to feel welcomed into our community, into our library community. We also had a sensory movie afternoon for the juniors. So we had about 30 kids in our auditorium watching, all I can think of is the song, Let It Go. What's that movie? Anyway. Also, I was just recently a guest in their Youth Disability Action Council on Zoom to talk about September 10th was International or World Suicide Prevention Day. So I had about 17 autistic youth talking about positive mental health and suicide prevention. Next slide. So the Halton, so around equity and diversity and inclusion initiatives, I have been a part of the Halton Equity and Diversity Roundtable since its inception. So I think that was in 2013. And I'm currently the co-chair of the coordinating committee. We recently achieved some gap funding from the Halton Region Community Investment Fund, which really is going to allow us to continue the work. Because of what's happening in the world today around anti-Black racism and anti-Indigenous racism, people are really paying attention to equity, inclusion, diversity, and anti-oppression frameworks, and what are we doing? And so Halton Equity and Diversity Roundtable has been very fortunate enough to be now centered as a leader in kind of doing that community work where lots of agencies can do it internally. What this roundtable does is very community-based and really talking to the Black folks of Halton and Oakville and getting their experiences. And so we are going to be informing and presenting. We did present to the Community Safety and Wellbeing Plan System Leadership Team just recently, last week. And that presentation really was centered around the Halton Equity Charter that we have created, which is really a commitment to agencies and individuals and businesses to commit to working around equity, diversity, inclusion, and also anti-oppression. So the newcomer population is near and dear to my heart as well, and I have been sitting on the newcomer strategy civic engagement team for many years. And you will know, because I presented this to you, we achieved Immigration, Refugee, Citizenship Canada newcomer grant, which will see eventually the Halton newcomer info pods using the Halton Community Services Database Directory. That is underway, and we are continuing. We just signed the contract, and we've got our first funding check in our bank. So we are moving forward with that, doing some community consultations with newcomers. That's just a little snippet of, like, every time I do this kind of presentation and list things on a PowerPoint, there's always something new that comes out, like the next day or the day that I'm presenting. Yeah. I'm going to turn it back to Danica.
Next slide, please. Okay, so I'm going to speak about from a program development viewpoint in terms of tactics we're using to provide more inclusive programming and services. So as we have in the past and will continue to, we're strengthening and building relationships and partnership opportunities with community organizations and stakeholders to provide insight into community needs, collaboratively develop programs, and to cross-promote. Most recently, some of the partnership opportunities we've been able to undertake is a LinkedIn job search in partnership with Newcomer Information Center, resume building in partnership with Sheridan College, Kids Library Club Show and Tell with Journey, the support dog, and that was in partnership with Halton Regional Police Service and was an opportunity to make an inclusive space for diverse abilities. How to make a webcomic with artist Jay Pollock, showcasing LGBTQ voices and creating a safe space for LGBTQ youth. And Marcus mentioned it, the Cooking Bannock with an Indigenous lead, Angela Belgrade. I'm so glad that Marcus could help make that happen. The other tactic we are using to provide more meaningful, inclusive service and programs is taking a community-based approach to building programs. So this started at the end of 2019. We developed community profiles that were tailored to each library service point. So we have 7 of them, which is reflective of who's living in the neighborhood, as well as partnership opportunities and community assets. So that those are driving what programs we should offer locally. Obviously, now that we're virtual, it's a little bit different, but I'm really looking forward to being able to create more neighborhood-based programming opportunities. The other tactic I'll share on this slide is, as a public library, we have an incredible platform and opportunity to share stories, and that's truly what we do. We share stories. So we've been much more intentional in terms of our selection for our family storytime material, and we were able to make use of some of that funding that was discussed in collections to revamp our family storytime collection. So you'll see that in our virtual story times on YouTube and on Zoom webinar. For a few years now, we've been really intentional about our book club titles, making sure that we're sharing Indigenous voices, BIPOC voices, LGBTQ voices, authors, and illustrators. And we also use diverse themes in our Let's Talk About Books, Movies, and More, which is really just a discussion group to build social connection. And I know November's theme is discussing immigrant experiences, and they've done diverse Canadian women. The themes are quite diverse. Next slide. We do apply an inclusion lens to programs and services, and from the customer experience values, that's our top priority with programming in terms of making decisions. And we empower staff to have the conversations and apply the lens to their day-to-day work. We are launching in fall of 2020 using Beanstack, I think it was mentioned, a Read Woke Challenge. This is in partnership with Barrie and Calgary Library, but it really came out of a school librarian, Cicely Lewis, who in the US, who wanted to empower her students to understand and empathize with different groups in the community. I believe there's 10 categories, and Barrie, Calgary Public Library, and Oakville Public Library work together to make it Canadian themed, making sure that the categories were inclusive and appropriate through surveys and polls. And then the reading list was curated by librarians focusing on Canadian authors. So that also launches. And finally, I am working on the program policy and will include inclusive and anti-oppression language to guide us in our programming decisions. Next slide. Next slide. And I think, Marcus, did you want to speak to this one?
Sure, absolutely.
Okay.
So some of our next steps, of course, will be to continue to strengthen our partnerships and community-based service. There's a lot out there, and I think that our partnership and our work with the Halton Equity and Diversity Roundtable will really center Black voices and Indigenous voices within our programs and services and our collection. Danica mentioned anti-oppression language, so we need to look at what we're saying in our policies, what we're saying in our programs, to really shine that light on that we are anti-oppression positive, and also continue to empower our staff to apply that inclusion lens and that anti-oppression lens. So we've already had some conversations internally with myself and 2 other staff members who are very interested and very knowledgeable and experienced in anti-oppression and equity, diversity, and inclusion. And so we're going to, we've had some initial conversations, but we really do want to provide staff with some training perhaps, or some opportunities like a lunch and learn book club, and with the help of the Halton Equity and Diversity Roundtable, to be able to have members from Black communities or Indigenous communities facilitate a lunch and learn for our staff. So those are just some of the things that we're going to try to do, or we want to do as next steps. And that's the end of our presentation.
Did you have any final question or final comments?
Yeah, the only thing I would add is also included in the report are some of the more back room. So the access card that Simona mentioned as part of the membership policy, as well as some of the internal training and HR practices that we're currently exploring in order to make sure that our commitment to diversity and inclusion is interwoven throughout the entire organization.
Okay, thank you. Questions for the team, I guess. Stephen.
Yeah, hi. Thanks very much for that. That's really interesting. The first question I have is for Danica, and it might even be for Simona because it's about circulation. But Danica, you piqued my interest there when at the front end of your conversation when you're talking about circulation of titles by diverse authors, rather. So, do we, from a circulation perspective, and I might use the wrong language, and I apologize, but do we code books by author, like author A published in certain year and is diverse kind of thing? So in other words, do we have a sense of the circulation of said books within our network?
No, it would be pretty difficult to pull that out. I can think of a great example. So Becoming by Michelle Obama has the most holds, or did, I might be wrong, for the longest time. So it's difficult to pull that out. Our cataloging is very antiquated and colonial. So that is a problem on itself. But
okay, no, and you're answering the question, and I wasn't sure. So thank you for that. I understand there's legacy issues here, and I use the word legacy for many definitions. So thank you for that. My next comment, I guess, and I'm here looking for guidance. I'm an editor, and and this might be more for Marcus, but in the last little bit, looking through the documents, I've seen 2 LGBTQ plus, 2 LGBTQ. Like I've seen 3 different versions, and I'm looking for guidance. Are we specifically in 3 cases talking about 3 different things, or are we trying to be consistent with what we're talking about from a diversity perspective? I'm just curious that it struck out to me that there's 3 different ways of using the acronyms, and I'm wondering if that's intentional or if we're looking to have a unified thing. So I'm looking for guidance. This is not an area of my expertise.
Yeah, absolutely. It's a great question, and it's an acronym for sexuality and gender identities, and so in Halton or in Oakville, we use 2S LGBTIQA plus. So it's longer. We can shorten it just because we can't say that all the time. Every community will use it differently. I intentionally put 2S, which is two spirits. So that's our first people are Indigenous. I put them first because they are first people. And so that's sort of a new, Stephen, that's a little bit of a newer version of the acronym, but I would be definitely advocating for going forward for the library to use 2S LGBTQ+.
For everything, like in the discussion about anything like that, you'd suggest that one?
Yes, when we're talking about the 2S LGBT community, I think that's how we should be referring to it now.
Okay, great. Thank you very much. That's very helpful.
This is an interesting point of reference, Marcus, when you rattled off that acronym, our closed captioner couldn't keep up. And they're sort of mangling it as we go. That's a big acronym. Other questions? Andrew, go ahead.
Thank you, Danica and Marcus. This is very thorough, and I'm really impressed with all of the initiatives that are underway. And I guess an overarching question for me is, this is not a one-year project or even a 5-year project. This is an ongoing, thing that needs to be done in terms of improving the diversity and the availability of materials, the inclusiveness, and so on and so forth. With such a broad spectrum of partnerships, initiatives, and programs and services, how are you choosing your focuses, like where to prioritize, what actions are being taken? And who are you consulting in terms of experts that might be able to guide?
So from Andrew, thank you for that. From my perspective, when I came to the library, I had 20 years of experience in the community engagement around 2S LGBTQ+. So I inserted myself everywhere I could in the region to talk about it. And so when Tara hired me, she said, stay in all your committees and figure out how the library and HIP fits to those. And so I have a lot of really great partners, and I know what the gaps are just from being in the community for such a long time, and from here and working with Black voices and Black people, and what they have experienced and how they're not included sometimes, and how they're feeling about the community. And then I think also, Andrew, the Halton Equity and Diversity Roundtable really is a key partner in terms of who sits on that committee and who represents that committee and does that work. And of course, the world stage really is now highlighting Black and Indigenous issues, and so I've really tried to look at what's happening in Oakville and hear what's happening in Oakville from our community perspective, and knowing and getting feedback from our agencies who work with different communities, but also what's happening in the world, and then the passions that I have around Indigenous, LGBTQ, and autism and equity.
Thank you.
Andrew,
and you touched.
Sorry. Can I just jump in really quick?
Yep.
So as Marcus indicated, we've really tried to take a community engagement tactic for the last number of years to really help drive our programming and our services. But it was really important to me that this presentation come to the board now, going into the strategic planning process that we're going to start next month, because we'll look to the board to provide some guidance on where we should be going with some of this. There's a lot of different groups, and the Halton diversity group is a really great one and has provided so much guidance with their information that they've passed down. But I do think that the board will have a role to play in exactly what you've asked, in helping us determine what our priorities are as we go forward. So I'm looking forward to those conversations.
Further questions? Councillor Hazard-Thiel.
Thank you very much. What a wonderful presentation and lots of amazing community work. I'm struck a little bit by, as we're going into the strategic plan, a gap that I see in some of the materials, which is I'm not sure we really documented what the gaps are from a perspective of those who don't feel included, and may want us to do things better and differently. And I'm wondering, is there a document like that you're working from, and we just didn't go through it? that really says that these are some key fundamentals or key issues that we have to, I mean, you've talked about inclusionary language, that's just a general, lots of people are talking about that. But in the library itself, how have we identified those gaps and who have helped us identify those gaps?
I can speak to a bit of that. We're in the process of identifying gaps using our community profiles. That was like the first step in the process, is finding out who's in our neighborhoods, collecting their stories. The documents are quite large, as well as the data and what community assets are available. So we're not being redundant. So we're partnering when we can and sharing resources. So that was kind of the first step of identifying gaps. Once we had them done, I think in January, and then once COVID hit, it's been a little bit more challenging to get that kind of local on the ground that to continue. But we are still working with our partners.
Okay.
It's also been beneficial to have so many of our staff members, such as Marcus and Danica, and those that work with them out on different groups and having different partnerships, because we get feedback that way too, where people may not be able to come to us directly, but it gets passed to us, and I think those connections have been really, really helpful as well.
So as a follow-up to that, just food for thought, one of the common criticisms that we hear, not about the library at all, I mean, but in general about inclusion and understanding and walking in other people's paths and shoes, is that they're not at the table to have that discussion. So in the simplest of, crudest of ways, a whole bunch of white people, are making decisions and having a discussion about it, and that's just not cool. Like, that's not how it needs to be. And I'm sure that's not at all based on what you've just described, how you're approaching it, but it would be good for us to be able to understand and pull some additional folks in and know how we're doing that. It's just struck me as something I wasn't understanding that as you were presenting. I mean, if we had 20 Marcuses, that'd be lovely. If we had 20, Danicas and Angelas and all that, that's obviously the goal, but I wasn't seeing a document. So I wanted to call that out. And the other, I wanted to just, this neighborhood data and appreciation of the neighborhood profiles, I have to say that excited me, because it's exactly the challenge that a branch that's near and dear to my heart that I never seem to be able to get what I want needs. And so will you be coming back to the board to talk about what that neighborhood profiles are and how that might change some of our approach in more tactical ways?
I can. We have the presentation done, so I can, if that's what the board would want.
I'd look to my fellow board members if they have an interest in it. I certainly do. I think it gives us a flavor, a more intimate understanding of our customers, and how we might better broaden our services. So I want to close with one last question, which is, a while ago we started bringing in books that the Asian community was donating and getting those translated. Are those part of the multilingual books that you were referencing earlier, Danica?
I'd have to get back to you on that. I remember the collection and I remember the discussion, but I'd have to get back to you on that one.
If you would, I'd appreciate it. Thanks very much.
I can speak. I can speak to that slightly. In that, I was our collections manager, Lisa Williams, gave me an update on those titles. We do have them, and they are in the process of being put out into the wild, into the different branches. Definitely later than any of us had hoped, but they are out there and are a part of those multilingual collections. Yes.
Great. Marcus, did you have a comment? You were attempting to speak? Except you're muted.
I was just going to give that bit of an update that Tara just gave about those books, but also that those books have been donated by a group that is really interested in still continuing to do some fundraising for us and purchase books in different languages, in Asian languages. I just wanted to comment on Councillor Hazlitt Teal's comment about a bunch of white folks sitting around the table making decisions, and so that's when we talk about I hear that a lot, and so that's why we're shifting. Not shifting, but we're talking about diversity, equity, and inclusion, which to me is really the recognition of difference and the celebration of difference, right? When we talk about anti-oppression, that is our strategies and our theories to change the systems that prevent a person of color to come to a 9 o'clock meeting, right? Because they're not in a position where they can take time off of their work, or their work supports them to go into community organization or community consultations and that sort of thing. So it really is, that's where we're talking about anti-oppression and changing the systems so that we can better engage and have Black voices and Indigenous voices and Asian voices and disability voices at our tables making decisions. My theory is always my community engagement pieces, and when I create things, well, I don't create them. I never do anything without that community. So I don't create something for the community. I go to the community, and that's what we're doing with the info pods. We're going to the community, consulting with them, say, what is it you need? How would this help? And they give me the feedback, and then I come back to Danica and I have like amazing discussions about what we can do in the library around programming and community outreach. So for us, Danica and I, it really is listening to the community. And so our partners tell us and the community tells us. That's how we operate.
Okay, thank you, Marcus. Anything further on this report, or Tara, did you have anything else to?
Nope.
No? Okay. I'll look for a motion to receive the report. Councillor Hazlitt-Thiel, seconded by Stephen. Thank you very much. All in favor? That is carried. Just a quick, we have the CEO update next, but I'm going to declare a brief recess for 5 minutes. It's currently 8:23, and I intend to resume at, I'm going to make it a little bit more than 5 minutes. I'm going to resume at 8:30. So everybody can recharge your glasses or grab a snack, and we'll see you back here at 8:30. Opportunity to grab another beverage and have a bit of a break. I hope everybody else had one as well. So let's go right on into the CEO's report. And Tara, take it away.
Great. We'll just wait for the presentation to come up.
Thank you.
Wonderful. Okay. So just wanted to start with some updates to the pandemic situation at OPL. So everybody is aware that there has been an increase in active cases over the past several weeks, leading us to do a full review of what we have in place, as well as planning for the future, whatever that will bring. So we have reactivated active screening for staff and on-site contractors. We had moved to passive screening, but we are back doing active screening, which requires staff to actively fill out a form. We're increasing contact tracing of customers, so that will come in place next week. We're adding in more stanchions to assist with physical distancing. So we are finding that people are becoming a little bit blind to the markers on the floor. So we've purchased some more stanchions just to try to create a bit more of a flow and a barrier around some of our service desks to assist with that physical distancing. And I'm a part of the town EOC, Emergency Operations Center, and we were meeting once a week, and that has increased to twice a week and will grow as needed as the situation develops. Additionally, the board will remember that I sent this out a week or two ago, that we are very excited to have White Oaks and Clearview open. After some back and forth with the school board, we finally landed on scenarios that work best for both of us. So they open next week, and these will be their operating hours for now. Last week, we also talked about the Central One Desk conversion that will be happening at Central Library in October. I do believe the work will start mid to late October. Interestingly enough, I'm not sure if the board remembers, but I brought this to the September 2019 board meeting for approval, as well as the communication plan. So if anybody is interested, they can go back and take a look at that. It's been a bit of a delay, but we're excited to get it in place. For those of you who have been at Central, it is basically just the removal of that giant service desk when you first come in, and reallocating that space back to the public. We're going to move all the services to the service desk in front of the Oakville room. And this is in line with the one desk conversion we've completed at just about every other library. I think Woodside is the only one with 2 desks, so that will be next on our list. So I just wanted to provide you a little bit of what that is going to look like. You can see that there's a seating area. This is, of course, maybe tweaked a little bit for our current circumstances, but what we will get to again, hopefully in the near future. Oh, there is no plan to close for that. We work really closely with FCM and the contractor, so they can do that without having to close. We are closed more. We have 2 days, the Sunday and Monday, so they'll be able to take full advantage of those 2 days to do anything that might be most disruptive, and then do the remainder of the work, it being sanctioned off, but while we're open. So just a brief website update. There hasn't been a lot of movement on this since we spoke in August. The requirements have been signed off by OPL. Purchasing received them today, and they expect to issue the RFP Monday or Tuesday. If the board remembers the timeline that we presented in August, it's not quite 2 weeks, it's about a week and a half. And some of that was just a delay in getting the final version that we received in order to be able to truly be able to create the final requirement document. So we are working there. I will bring a more detailed update in October when we'll have more movement on this. So we are launching the 1,000 Books Before Kindergarten Beanstack Challenge. So we're definitely taking full advantage of that application that we purchased for the year. The goal is that every child should read 1,000 books before they start kindergarten, and that really helps lay the foundation for success in school. So we're going to be using our new Beanstack app online to offer that challenge out there. And the challenge will incorporate reading lists on a variety of different topics in order to support parents and their caregivers for it. So we're really excited to be doing that. The food shelf at Central opened and is fully stocked. Again, we would like to thank Food for Life for helping us out with that. We're also in conversations with them. They have a fridge for us as well that we're hoping to install rather shortly. That way we can also offer fresh food and produce individually packaged for people. There is a fridge currently at Glen Abbey Community Center that's well used, so we're really excited to be able to extend that here. It is extremely well used. And this just launched this week, a couple days ago. We pulled together kind of a one-stop shop for all of OPL's research resources to help students reach academic success, particularly in a virtual kind of environment. It's now a dedicated page. It has all the different resources. It has programs. It has different lists of connections out in order to be able to assist students in being successful this year. So it literally just launched, I think, a couple days ago. So feel free to check it out and let us know what you think. And then Joe talked a little bit about the launch of the novel branch, but in case anybody didn't know what that looked like, these are the 2 novel branches. This one is at St. Luke's Community Center, and we are hoping, well, not hoping, we are launching those as part of Library Week in October. I think St. Luke is scheduled to open the first week of October 4th. So we're excited to get back into that facility. And the other one is located at Queen Elizabeth Park Community and Cultural Center. So we're looking forward to adding a browsing selection to our OPL Express locations with lockers. And, besides all the stuff Marcus does that he included in the diversity and inclusion presentation, he also sits on a number of boards, one of them being Inform Canada and Inform Ontario, and that is an organization that really focuses on community services and the database. And OPL is hosting part of their annual conference. So these are the 4 sessions that OPL will be hosting out there. So there are some interesting ones in there. If you're interested, we would definitely love to have you attend. And then just strategic planning update. Thanks to everybody for getting back to me. Right now, our tentative dates are, we're looking at 2.5 sessions on Zoom on October 15th and November 5th from 4 to 6:30. And I figure since I all had you in one place, if I could just get a confirmation from everybody that that works, then I will lock Glenn in and we will start actively planning for those, because we're really excited to get in there. And that was the last slide. So,
Thank you very much. Did you want to poll the board now?
Yes,
Does anybody have an objection to any of those dates? Any problem with any of those dates? Looks like we're going to have a full house.
Awesome. That's
great.
fantastic.
Thank you. Questions for Tara? Stephen?
Okay, thank you. Okay, thank you very much for that. I'm just quickly checking my calendar. I'm sure that's going to work anyway. So with respect to the planning sessions, the strategic planning sessions, they're important. I'm looking forward to them. But I guess I'll ask a question, and I don't want this to come out the wrong way, but is the person we have coming in going to start off with, his observations on our board and so on, or are we going to start what we did a few years ago, and maybe that's why we didn't bring it back, on strategy 101? Because I don't think we need the latter, and we certainly need the former.
Right. So this is like a pre-strategic planning session. So the idea is to have a number of different exercises that the board will be put through to try and gather information about what they think is important in order to include in the strategic plan. What kind of community engagement are you looking for? What area should we focus on? It's not him speaking, it's him facilitating different exercises to draw out the information that we need from the board.
Awesome, great, because none of us really need, well, I need not go into it. If it's not going to be that, we don't have to talk about it. So that's
going to
good.
be super interactive.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's Glenn, right?
It's Glenn, yeah.
Yeah. So the facilitator, just so you know, is really awesome. The facilitator is doing this. He's really awesome. He does not try to frame the conversation or insert himself in the conversation. He just facilitates it, and he's very good at what he does. He did our police board business plan recently, and he's currently in the midst of facilitating the regional official plan review. And I can't say enough great things about Glenn Pothier.
Well, that's awesome. Is it possible for someone on staff just to send out those, just so it's in all our respective calendars then, since we've got it locked down?
Oh, absolutely. Once that I confirmed with you, I'm going to send out meeting requests tomorrow.
Great. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Stephen. Anything further? Councillor Janet? I couldn't say Haslett Thiel.
It's okay. I'm starting to think 35 years by hyphenated names enough. I'll still keep the guy, just not the hyphen.
There you go.
Is there pre-reading at all going into these strategic planning discussions? I'm having led a few over the years. I often find we all arrive at it with a different lens of what we expect to accomplish and how we're going to accomplish it. And is there any pre-reading, any sort of documents that would help?
So that's a conversation that Glenn and I have scheduled for next week about what kind of resources that he's expecting that we're going to try to get to the board in advance. There shouldn't be too much pre-reading necessary, because it really is about pulling out of the board's brains. Like I know one of the activities is like a SWOT analysis. So what, from your experience out in the community, as well as sitting on the board, what do you see as our our threats and our obstacles, and those types of situations? And also, what are you looking for? What does a strategic plan look like? What does a successful strategic plan look like? And those types of things. But I will definitely confirm with him. But I don't think for this section in particular, that there's a lot of pre-reading. When we actually start the strategic planning process and do a workshop with the board for that, there will likely be some research that we will, at the library, will have done for like an environmental study that we'll bring forward to the board for them to have reference and just think a little bit about what we're happening provincially and nationally and internationally.
That would be helpful, thank you. I'm going to just go back to the central library change. And thank you for reminding us it was September of 2019. The communication plan, did it include signage going up so that our users are not surprised when we're doing this?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, we just got the date yesterday or today. So Joe is just plugging that into the communication plan, and that information will start to go out on that shortly. Yeah, nobody should be surprised when they come in.
Okay, great. Thanks very much.
Thank you. Anything further? Any more questions? I see none. Okay, thank you very much. Members of the board, that brings us to the end of our agenda. Is there any other new business to come before this meeting this evening? Oh, I'm sorry. Yes, I forgot to get the motion to receive the CEO's report. Can somebody provide that for me? What are you laughing at, Stephen Bright? Moved by Stephen Bright, seconded by Bill Smith. All in favor? That's carried. Now, is there any other new business to come before this board this evening? Seeing none, I can report that we've already disposed of the confidential agenda, which only was comprised of, I'll come to you in a second, which was only comprised of the minutes of the confidential meeting last month. So we don't have to go in camera, but I will go to Andrew. He's got some new business. That library you're sitting in is staying open pretty late.
Pardon me?
That library that you're sitting in is staying open pretty late for you.
They stayed open for me.
That's nice.
Yeah. Sorry, before we went on break, there was a mention of an email, and I don't see it, and I don't know what you were referring to.
It's not time sensitive at the moment. We've already gone past the item. I can explain to you afterwards instead of taking everybody else through it.
Then I have no new business. Thank you.
Thank you. I'll look for a motion to adjourn tonight's meeting. Can somebody provide that for me? Unless you want to stay. Susan, thank you. Seconded by Councillor Janet Haslett-Thiel. All in favor? This meeting is adjourned. Thank you very much for your time and attention. And Andrew.